Hey everybody, BTO Pro here. Fresh off DrupalCon that went awesome. So I wanted to do something more fun because I've been pretty burned out lately and getting ready for that. Usually I do little like teaching things or make fun elements, and someone gave me the idea to make a really awesome element. So we're gonna work on it. It's really important if you have a project that people are ever going to use, you have a Rickroll element, obviously. Right, so we really need to be able to Rickroll people at scale. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the Rickroll element because there's an issue in the issue queue. And so, I mean, if there's an issue to make a Rickroll element that's HAX capable, then obviously we're going to need to go about doing that. But along the way, we're gonna make a little web component and show kind of what my build process is, because we can build these things in minutes sometimes, as you'll see here. So if you look for the LRN web components organization, see we have 148 projects at the time typing this. The way we get stuff up there really fast is there's a little LRN developer repo. And then it just has some boilerplate of how we build new things. Now, if you use Polymer and you use Polymer init, it also will generate a boilerplate. And we'll probably change this to a yeoman in the future. But effectively, this is what our boilerplate is. So our elements get stamped out with materialized CSS styles, HAX body behaviors, and schema behaviors, just kind of already there, ready to go. Because those are the three most common behaviors that I mix into things, right? A style mix in, a way to talk to HAX, and a way to schematize things more easily. So then to implement said behaviors, you end up getting something like this. And so I just mix those in automatically. And then I provide a little nice, hey, this is how to wire up to HAX. So I just provide a sample gizmo integration, and that's it. The other things that this boilerplate does is it positions things to be contributed to webcomponents.org very quickly. And it also uses the license that we use for everything. So let's take a look at how we end up using this. So when you run through a little setup, I can then type LRN dev, and it says some crazy thing that I wrote. How can I help you? So I'm gonna build a new component, and then it'll say, hey, you need an argument to pass in, so I'm going to name this element Rickroll. And so the first step in any good Rickroll is to have an element that's Rickroll, right? If we're going to start Rickrolling people at scale, we need to be able to implement one element and crank that out. So when I start my new Rickroll component, you'll see I just get this boilerplate, it implements these behaviors, and we've got this demo. Now, I think the first thing you need to cover is using someone else's element to take yourself further faster, right? So if we're going to do, an awesome Rickroll, then we need an awesome video player. There are a lot of video players on webcomponents.org, and then there's one that hasn't been contributed yet because it's not 100% prime time, and that is the A11Y media player. Now, Nikki has been working on this thing a lot. And so to see what that is, it's a highly accessible media player with support for closed captions and speed controls, all that great stuff. So let's try and wire this up to a solid Rickroll. Now, I'm going to analyze it and say, okay, well, let's look. It seems like it doesn't accept remote sources, right? I mean, it does sort of, but that's MP4. So when I'm kind of taking a look at an element and I want to analyze it, I'm going to read through some of the documentation. This mostly, because it's our boilerplate, just says like, hey, this is a thing. So I'm going to look in media player. We're going to see if there's anything about YouTube, right? Because we need YouTube integration if we're going to do an effective Rickroll. I want all those views to really start piling up when we start Rickrolling people at scale. So if I can look through, I can see Nikki is a documentation monster, and is also really leveraging all the different types of mix-ins, all the ways that you can color things with CSS variables. So we can scroll through, you can see that there's a video tag, And so because there's a video tag, I'm not going to be able to use this element to display YouTube. I know we've gone back and forth about whether or not to use YouTube. So in that case, we can go, okay, I don't know if I have an element. Let's go to webcomponents.org, and I'm going to search for video, just see what the heck's out there for video. So you can see there's a whole lot of things for video. Some things are specifically around YouTube. But for the purposes of today, I'm going to use this one that we've already made. So this is something that may end up merging efforts with Nikki's iteration. This is one that I made, and this one supports SoundCloud, YouTube, Vimeo, and has as a fallback delivering MP4 files. And so it's responsive by default, and it's got some other niceties associated with theming that I've probably showed in a few videos. So let's use that one. So what do I do if I want to use someone else's element? So the workflow for that is, I have no idea why they hide it here, but I go to webcomponents.org, I hit the plus sign, you can see download, and I get this little Bower command, which I can click, and it copies to my clipboard. So what do I do with that? Well, I'm going to open a new window. When I run the little mini tooling that we have, you'll see it basically did Polymer init and then Polymer serve, except it's our version of init. So it puts files in a little bit different directory. It creates a Git repo automatically. Some other just stuff because I'm lazy. So if we go into LRN Web Components, Rick-roll, which again, because I'm lazy, I know it's going to put that element there. You can see this is on master. And then what I'm going to do is just paste that right there. And so that, what it did, if you're not familiar with Bower, I will call that up. All right. So if I look for my Rickroll, you can see it downloaded into Bower components, and now there should be video player. But then what it does is it looks off bower.json, and then it goes and gets all those dependencies as well. So it's a dependency management tree just to get everything together. It is deprecated before anyone points out that it's deprecated. I'm well aware of that. Everyone in the stinking world is aware of that, that knows what deprecated is. But it's not a huge deal. Once Polymer 3.0 comes out and gets off it and moves to NPM, then I'll start moving over to NPM instead. It's basically just going to be the directory things resolved to. Okay, so we've got that in place, and we've downloaded the dependency, but now we have to actually use it. So let's start writing that web component, the always important Rickroll element. Replace this over in Sublime Text. And see, I have a bunch of files associated with presenting a demonstration, so I get my Rickroll demo. And then in here is the actual guts of the Rickroll element. So now I need to bring in that video player. So the way to do that is link rel equals import ref equals ... video player and video player HTML. And so now I have the reference here, which means whenever this goes to unpack, it's going to know what a video player is, but it's not actually going to put it on the screen anywhere. It's just the dependencies are all in place. Hooray! So let's figure out how the heck we use a video player. So I can go to, see this little example here. I can do video, source, cool. So let's go back. Let's paste that in so I know how a video player works. And then title, we're going to take title out for the moment. And Rickroll, or we'll just give this roll source, right? It's really important that you name things correctly. So this would be the source of your Rick to be rollin'. Okay. And so this would be a string. Now, if I want to do data binding, this gets into Polymer specific, but a lot of different frameworks have this and libraries. So do open double bracket, close bracket. This is going to effectively say, hey, data bind. And so if I copy and paste the roll source there, now what will happen is this element will load up. It'll look for something called roll-source. We'll go over that in a second, why. And then it's going to put that there. So the other thing I can do with Polymer, let's have a fallback. Because we always want a solid Rickroll out of the box. And so we're just going to paste this, watch this YouTube video there, right? So you could override it and do other Rickrolls I don't know if there's any other good ones. Like, I mean, this is, why would you roll with Rick beyond this one? But anyway, let's go back to a little element. So I've got that as my default. The other thing I could do is then under demo, I'm going to go to index, and you'll see this is the demo space of a Rickroll tag. So I want the simplest form in this case to just be Rick-roll. But let's support other things just to illustrate what it is. Rickroll from a different source. Okay, so the way that we would do that then is I would put in roll source. And you may have noticed I put roll and then capital S. This is a silly translation between JavaScript and HTML. In JavaScript, you fundamentally can't write Rick-roll. I can't have a variable name that because of the hyphen. So what ends up happening is all hyphens in the names of properties get translated into a camel case. So what I can do here is then to pass this value in to roll hyphen source equals, and then we're going to plug in a different YouTube video. I don't even know what that is. So that would be the idea, is that I could override this Rickroll. So let's go and see what that looks like. Refresh, and so my documentation self-updates. This is something I love about the Polymer tooling. So it's updated by analyzing that little thing. You can see that there's a roll source. It's a string, and it defaults to the one and only Rickroll. And so now, when I load this up, if I would put Rick-roll on the internet, right, we just start rolling all over the place with Rick. Okay, so, but I could override it, and I could throw up this video that you should all really go and watch. It's stinking awesome to see me drink a lot of caffeine, and then have Nikki try to keep me in check. So we can override that. So you see, because I defined roll source, and because this one didn't, right, we can override what that default value is and pump it out on the other side. So that's the basics of this whole approach. When it comes to defining a property, implementing that property, using someone else's tag that they created, and getting the dependencies for it. Now, if you imagine you just keep doing this over and over and over and over and over and over again, you're basically building with Lego bricks. But the Lego bricks are HTML. So let's get into that HAX binding. Part of this was so that I could data bind a Rickroll as well. So if I wanted to data bind a Rickroll, this would be a Rickroll. Okay. The HAX schema is pretty simple. I tried to make it really readable. So can you scale a Rickroll? Yes. Can you position a Rickroll? Yes. Can you edit the source of a Rickroll? No. Okay. So then the description of a Rickroll is pretty obviously the best way to troll anyone ever. Okay. We're going to leave it as a play circle. Let's make this purple. Why not? It's going to be under, not video. We haven't implemented the groups aspect of HAX fully yet, but this is for future functionality. So I'm going to say median. This is also funny. And so it handles type video, and I'm going to say, yeah, that's fine. URL. So if I'm given a URL, then data bind it to, and it would have been source. However, I call it roll source because we're awesome here. So bind it to roll source. Okay. And then this is just some metadata. Again, this hasn't been implemented yet, but I'm going to say this is part of LRN web components. Okay. Now we get into the configuration settings and the JSON schema. So this is HAX schema, which will translate to JSON schema. If you're not familiar with JSON schema, it's a pretty awesome little concept. It's just about how you can define the way to edit things that come from schema in the first place. So by saying, like this property that I just gave you is type string, you can make certain decisions based on that. So you can read through that. I'm not going to go over JSON schema in detail, but it's a really powerful little concept. So I'm going to put in my roll source in the case of this because it's HAX. This is HAX data binding, if you will, via JSON schema. So I'm going to say property. So this is saying, hey, what is the property that you want to edit? And then what do you want to present? And so this would be the title on the interface. So I'm just going to say source. I'm going to be lazy and just copy and paste for these. And the description is going to be the source of the rolling from a Rick. Again, I'll copy and paste that. A lot of times these end up being very similar, at least for simple elements. If you've seen some of the more complex elements that we've done, such as the video player itself, if I go to the video player, you'll see that video player has a lot of additional properties, a lot of additional handling, and a lot of additional settings and deviation between quick and configuration. So there's not a one-to-one relationship there for always. Just wanted to illustrate that. We can also do some more advanced ones, which I won't be at the moment. And so you can see we have like a color picker or Boolean type of input versus just pure text field. We can also get into some slot management. I'm not going to go into that here. So we've got our roll source and the source of the rolling from a Rick. Okay, so yeah, that should be, I guess, maybe I don't want that. This is an iron icon association. So the way that we get our icons into the thing, I go and I search for iron icons, which is, you can use other icon sets. I just like this one because it's Google's, it's pretty simple. So I can search for link, I believe, there we go. So if I put icons : link into this icon area, and you don't actually need the icons part because that's the default, but we'll just do it to do it. Okay, so by doing this, we've effectively bound to HAX. If HAX is available, you'll be able to Rickroll HAX. It's very, very important, obviously. So let's say I wanted to extend the Rickroll, though. So the Rickroll currently, when I hit play, like it loads up, but like it's not going to Rickroll anyone because it's not auto-playing. It has no ability to do that data binding. So like they're going to have to Rickroll themselves right now, which is unacceptable. So how do we go about doing that? Well, first we need to put in some basic state management. And so we're going to go and we're going to do a new Boolean called Autoplay. Now, the video player tag doesn't actually have autoplay capability because autoplaying is annoying. And so you shouldn't let people autoplay. However, it's really important that we autoplay on a Rickroll or have a way of toggling to actually accomplish the Rickroll. So we're going to do autoplay as our little value, and actually let's change that to just auto, and we'll make the documentation automatically play the Rickroll. Okay, so auto, and then we're going to say type is Boolean, and value is, we're going to do false to start so we can show kind of triggering it automatically. So, all right, so we've got this on. Now what we're going to want to do is notice when auto changes, and if it changes to true, then we need to do something. So we're going to set an observer, and the observer is going to be auto changed. Now you can name these however you want. This is just the convention that I like to do. So I'll document it, call back to notice that auto's state has changed. Okay, and then in Polymer, what this will let you bind to is you'll get a new value and you'll get an old value. So you'll be able to see what it was and what it became in this case. So I'm going to do a type check. I'm going to do type of old value, type of new value does not equal type of undefined. So I want to make sure that it actually there has some data before I go and do any evaluation. I probably don't even need to do it in this case, but meh. All right, and we're going to see if old value, because old value should always be set, right? Because I set it automatically here with false. So we're going to see if not old value, meaning that it's false, and new value, which would imply, hey, make sure new value isn't undefined, and that the old value is false, and that the new value is true, meaning that it flipped from false to true, effectively. And so when that happens, what we're going to want to do is modify the video player tag in some way. And so we're going to get into some really interesting data conventions that Polymer nets you to do some more complex operations. So first of all, if you're familiar with jQuery, you have the $sign. People would write the $sign everywhere, and it was really useful because you could just do like dot class name, right? And know that you were targeting everything that had that class name. And then you could just do like add class, the end. Oops, the end. Right? That's an incredibly powerful little convention. Well, Polymer has two very similar conventions to it. So the first is a single $sign. And the way we use the single $sign is when Polymer loads our elements in, it's going to leave an index about things that have an ID. So another awesome concept with web components is you can, having multiple IDs with the same name doesn't matter anymore, either from a targeting perspective or from CSS. So what I could do with this video player, I want to be able to call that video player after the page is loaded. So I'm going to call this video as my ID for it. What will now be given to me is I will have access to the following. I can do this because everything is scoped to this element I'm working on, $sign, which is the convention for give me the shorthand list of IDs in this thing. And then I can do .video. And what this is going to do is going to give me access to this object in the DOM. And so now I can call things within that. Now, our video player, as I mentioned, doesn't have autoplay capability because that's obnoxious. We really don't want people to do autoplaying. However, there's ways to cheat at things like that. So what I can do is I can look in video player. I'll drag video player over here. Okay. And we can look down in video player and we can see that there is an iframe. Now, if something is YouTube, and I know this because I've worked with it, but iframed implies, hey, this is from YouTube or Vimeo or someplace external. I got to iframe it versus if it's an MP4, use a video tag. Okay. Now, when I constructed this, though, I didn't leave IDs laying around on these things, which is kind of annoying. I left it on video caption, so I can easily target video caption and update it, but didn't leave it on here. Okay, so how do I get access to the iframe? Because I'm going to need to know the SRC of the iframe effectively. So I could do this in two ways. Either I can manipulate the SRC property, right? And I could look down and go, oh shoot, that is computed. And because it's computed, it's kind of, this is a little bit of security through obscurity built into the video player. It's enforcing that you don't just throw whatever you want into the URL. Okay, so like in the case of YouTube, you can see there is no ability for you to have set the auto flag when it got passed in. As a result, you can't actually set auto on a video that goes into video player. You also are going to get the correct URL every time, and you're going to get a no cookie based YouTube domain. So these are some niceties of the way we've integrated YouTube. Now, as a result of this video, I might go and make it so that you can do autoplay. Really, you should not be able to do autoplay. But let's go back up in here. So I can't modify SRC effectively because it's a computed property. Computed properties mean, hey, run this function. Whenever you see this property change, the response of this equals me. And so we could pass in a source, but source is going to get cleaned up and it's going to scrub stuff off. So really what I need to do is I need to hijack this iframe directly. Okay, so how do I do that? Well, this gets the other jQuery-esque convention, which is a $sign. Whoa, $sign. So when I do $sign, this is more or less the equivalent of your element query from jQuery. And so what I'm now saying is, in the scope of me, find the video player, okay, so that's the video player, go into there and find an iframe, okay, and now I'm going to write normal looking JavaScript and do a set attribute of SRC, and we're going to have to take that value again. It's kind of obnoxious to do it this way, but I'm going to do that.get attribute. We're going to get the attribute of that SRC, and then we're going to add on the secret sauce to break the internet, which is autoplay equals 1. Okay, So because I've done this, what this is effectively saying is whenever auto changes and it gets true, then we need to throw autoplay on there. It shouldn't be terribly difficult. Now I don't know how you would make it go away. I guess what you could do is else if. All right, so let's make sure these type definitions are the same. I'm not really going to mess with even testing this case. This is still a silly one. And so if it went from true to false, effectively, then what we would want to do is kind of the same thing in reverse. We would then take that attribute, and instead of this, we would do a dot replace, and we'd replace that with nothing. So that should be enough to do a very minor state management so that when auto gets changed in my Rickroll element, it actually drills down, touches the iframe, and sets the source attribute to autoplay something. So let's save and make sure that this doesn't break first, right? Because I've been doing a bunch of stuff. All right, so nothing broke. Woohoo! Okay, now what I'm going to do is, I'm going to right-click and inspect. I'm going to pull this up, and we'll see in there, you can actually see, kind of the guts of what's in this. I've got my Rickroll element, I've got my video player, just like normal HTML. But now we're going to set, we're going to go in here, and we're going to set a new attribute. We're going to just do auto. Bam! Perfect. And so now, whenever state changes and Rickroll is set to auto, it's going to auto Rickroll. That is awesome, because that's the way we want to do it. We want to automatically Rickroll people, right? So I think we've got a pretty decent amount of flexibility in our Rickroll at this time, right? We don't care about the design of the Rickroll. We might want to allow for certain height and width, I guess, except it's responsive, so it'll just scale to whatever it's in, which is something nice, something we can kind of abuse. So let's get rid of that, and just to prove it, there we go. So now Rick is super responsively rolling. So let's close that out. Okay, so let's publish our element and ruin the internet. So we're going to go to terminal. I've got my Rick-roll element. Do git add a, git commit m, Rickroll working. Okay, git push origin master. I'm going to get an error. It's going to take a second and be like, hey, that repo doesn't exist. Yeah, you don't have the rights to do it. So this is the human intervention step that I have to take, in case you used our tooling and we're just like, hey, I'm going to push stuff to your repo. It ain't going to happen. So I have to go and make a repo here. And now I can make the Rick-roll element. And who doesn't love a good Rickroll? Cool. All right. So now that I've got the Rickroll repo up there, go to terminal, and I can do a git push origin master again. All right. And now there's this awesome little script we have baked in here. Let me make sure I have it pointing to the right place. No, I do not. Okay. I'm going to cheat for just a second here. We have this little tooling script that we still need to clean up a little bit. But what it does is it lets us run this. We can do sh update-demo.sh. What this is going to do is it's going to automatically generate a GitHub Pages branch, which has that demo site published to it. So this is a little bit of Polymer tooling on Polymer tooling, so to speak. And the reason I had to do some magic there is they just recently refactored the repo this is pointing to, so I need to update our tooling so that it uses the right version automatically. But so what that just did is now we have a GitHub Pages branch. If I go to my Rickroll element here, you can see I actually have a GitHub Pages branch, and it's going to be published there. So now the next thing I do is I go into edit, and it's LRN web components, and it should in this case be Rick-roll. I don't know if it'll be ready yet, but yeah, it's not published just yet. But Rick-roll will show up soon. Okay, so let's assume Rick-roll showed up. Let's assume we have a good version, and we want to publish this to webcomponents.org. So what we're going to do a git status, git add a, git commit m, updated demo generator. Okay, git push origin master. And now to get on webcomponents.org, it needs to smell like a web component, and then it needs to have a tagged release. So I'm going to do git tag. This is so stinking amazing. We'll just call it 1.0, git push tags. And so now we'll have a tagged release up on GitHub. And then I'm going to come to webcomponents.org. I'm going to hit publish element. My Rick-roll element has not published its demo site yet, which isn't a huge deal. I'll just paste this in here, that it is the associated demo website, because it'll show up in a little bit. GitHub Pages hasn't rebuilt yet. But I'm going to go to webcomponents.org. I'm going to go and read through and see, hey, you need to make sure you have an inline demo, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to tell them I'm not a robot, because I'm not, even though sometimes I type really fast. And then this should be the thing that's there. So let's go and point to lrn web components / rick-roll, and we can publish this glorious element to the internet. And so you can see, based on it being analyzed here, it requires Polymer, it requires materialized CSS, even though we didn't use that, I can probably take that out. It has support for HAX body behaviors and the video-player tag. So what does this look like in the context of HAX? Let's go back to terminal, cd ... and do HAX body. And we're going to do Bower install. Whoops, actually, you know what? Let's leverage webcomponents.org. I'm going to hit plus. I can see my Bower install routine here. And we're going to install the Rickroll element. So this just gets the dependencies. It might ask some questions. Oh, it didn't. Nice. And then, because I already know where I have to put this, then we have to put it on the page. Now, I could, this is just a silly thing for the purpose of this demo, so I'm not really going to make the Rickroll element show up at all times. But what I do is, this is in a HAX autoloader, which is a special element I wrote that will attempt to auto-load anything that it finds inside of it. So now, I do a Polymer serve open. And so this is the documentation for HAX. I'm going to fire up the demo. And, okay, so we've got that there. Edit. Let's look for rich media, make a gizmo. There's Rickroll. And now I can hit Rickroll. And now I've got my Rickroll, but I just have source, right? Because I didn't bind the auto aspect of this. I don't want you to, just be auto playing it all the time or whatever, or deliver that via HAX. But now you can put up a Rickroll anytime you want to in HAX. Obviously, that's not all of it, though, because we're going to want to actually trick people into clicking this. So what we should do is figure out how we could best trick people into doing this. So let's find like a really useful element, or I've made some really nice elements that are associated with modals. So there's lrn sys, and it's layout. There we go. So this is general purpose stuff for building layouts. I can go in, and the demo site, please forgive it, it's annoying, but I could have a more tools button in this case, and it's the contents of it there. You'll see it's a really slick little integration point to just say, oh yeah, whatever you dump in here, throw it over to the side, or throw it over to the right, or oops, down the page is the modals. We could have collapse lists. We could have, there it is, there's a modal, the dynamic image. Oh, that one apparently broke there in the demo. But, so that's the idea, that I could pop something up and it would appear to be one thing, but maybe we do something else and we trick the user. So, all right, so how would we go about doing that? Let's close out some of these windows, go back to Rickroll. All right, well, we want to trick the user, obviously. We want to get someone to implement this. So we should call it something like greatest modal, right? And someone on webcomponents.org is bound to try and implement the greatest modal, or they're going to go and just click on it to see what the demo's like, because they want to know who's bold enough to claim they have the greatest modal. And I mean, are you surprised at all? It's me. So greatest modal, okay, and now in here, I'm going to use my magic Rickroll, okay, so we're going to pull in that 1x Rickroll. I've got the greatest modal open in another window. So now I want to pull this into Sublime. I'm going to pull the greatest modal, or greatest Rickroll is really what we should call this, into here. I've got greatest modal, awesome. Now I'm going to go into Rickroll. I'm going to copy this. Now I don't need to define the video player. It's an important convention because the video player will come in Rickroll. So what I actually am going to do is I'm going to include Rickroll. And by including Rickroll, now I can implement Rickroll. And you see how the Legos start to stack up pretty quickly here. So I've got greatest modal. And in order to implement said greatest modal, I'm going to do a Bower install of that other thing I made, which is LRN sys layout. Now, LRN sys layout is going to pull in quite a bit. Yeah, it's got paper buttons to it. It's got iron icons. It's got some of the dialogue stuff. But now I'll be able to just use those. And so if I look at LRN sys layout, there's the dialogue. So I can pull that up. You can see there's a ton of stuff in here, right? So as you keep progressing through this approach, you keep getting bigger and bigger gains, right? So if you really focus first on that little tiny thing, right? Like the iframe that happens to have the Rickroll video in it, now I don't need to define that every time I want to Rickroll someone, right? So I'm going to start Rickrolling at scale way faster than anyone else in the history of the internet has been able to Rickroll. That's the kind of stuff that you can do with this approach because the approach stacks so easily. As we're at the 36-minute mark here, and I've already made 2 elements, and I'm starting to leverage elements in other elements. So, okay, so we want to measure state of the modal popover. There's some event listeners, right? This is a fairly sophisticated element, to be perfectly honest. So, there's also this dialogue trigger, so you can do listeners on things like this. And so you could say, hey, when the focus has changed on the paper button, do some different stuff there. You can do it based on the modal, right? You can get into some really sophisticated, cool stuff that ultimately your end users boil up and implement as a single tag. It's pretty amazing. So greatest modal is going to implement LRN sys dialog, and LRN sys dialog does a lot of good stuff, and it does it accessibly. So I could do LRN sys layout and then LRN sys dialog. Okay, and we're going to go back to webcomponents.org. I'm going to pull up LRN sys layout because I can't recall what the documentation is at the moment. Pull this up. Dialog. Okay, dialog. So we're going to pull dialog in here. We'll just copy. Whoops, nice little copy button. Come back into my greatest dialog. I'm going to put in that, and then greatest dialog, we can, we're not going to have that avatar in use. We are going to use the icon, and icon equals, we'll do that icons link. All right, so it's going to look like a link, and then inside there it's going to say, you got Rickrolled. Okay, now inside of here, right, so this is inside my dialog. I'm going to Rickroll them, right? Rickroll you. I'm going to do Rickroll auto. And now whenever this gets appended to the DOM, it's just going to Rickroll people. However, I don't want to just Rickroll automatically when this shows up, but I'll, just for the purposes of this demonstration at the moment, I will. So we're going to take off dynamic images. I don't care about that. We don't need that. We're going to keep those colors on there. And let's just see what this does at the moment. I don't honestly know. So the greatest modal ever technically has a title. And there's nothing there. So we have to look, and we can see, hey, cannot read property set attribute of null. Okay, so we can't read property set attribute of null. I wonder if you can't set auto when the whole thing loads up. Let's see. And this would be, something obviously I'd have to fix. Okay, so now we've got our little button. button opens, hey, you got Rickrolled and Rick is there. But what I really should be binding to is that event, right? So whenever someone clicks this, I want to trigger that other thing to then Rickroll. Okay, because Rickroll can't be auto out of the box. It's not I mean, that is a glitch, but it's kind of a nice feature too. So the other fun thing, right, I could do HAX binding to greatest modal and HAX binding to Rickroll. And then if I would include greatest modal in HAX, right, so that it would append to the DOM and get booted up, Rickroll is going to do that too. So you're going to get this cascading effect of things registering with HAX automatically when they get booted up. So let's make this not BTO Pro. It's going to be open the modal. So we'll make people think they have flexibility with it. It's kind of fun. And then there's alt text, which when I hover, this is the greatest modal ever. Okay, and so it's raised, and now, whoops, let's go back to that demo. Open the modal, sweet, and then we Rickroll them. Haha, we're hilarious. Okay, so go back to the demo. I like to type demo up there, so I don't have to keep going back and forth. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to set an event listener on LRNsys dialog. We're going to do ID equals dialog button, just like we did before, except now we're going to do, we could do a normal event listener. I'm going to do a Polymer, just the way that you register these listeners, and then in listeners we do dialog button dot tap, and we say Rickroll them people. Okay. All right, and now we're going to write a function, a silly callback just to Rickroll someone on webcomponents.org. Okay, so we've got Rickroll them people, and it's going to be a function. It's got an event. I'm not going to, well, I guess I could, yeah. There's some like normalizer stuff that I'm not going to cover. This is a nice little, with Polymer, you end up getting some of these little utilities that are extremely helpful. So this little two-line call here says analyze the Polymer associated DOM of that event and tell me what they actually clicked on, right? So it could be that I clicked on a paper button, which is buried inside of this LRNsys dialog. And so this will help normalize to the local target, which is actually I want to measure that they clicked on this, not the other thing. So when someone clicks that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to need to update this Rickroll. So I'm going to give Rickroll an ID, and we'll just call it Rickroll. Okay, and then whenever someone ends up doing this, I'm going to do a this dot $dot Rickroll dot auto equals true. And I probably don't even need this stuff, but let's just make a nice little if statement. If local dot tag name equals. In this case, it's going to be LRNsys dialog. Right, then we're going to Rickroll, set it to auto, and then we'll console.log that local just so that we know what it looks like. And now, the greatest modal demo will just Rickroll people. And so we don't need, we don't need the HAX data binding. I mean, it's kind of fun to be in there as well. I probably don't want that to register in case someone would actually put that in there. So we can take away these behaviors. We don't necessarily need those because this is just a silly demo. I am gonna, yeah, we'll get rid of those. I don't care about that. Okay. So now I've got my Rickroll. I can actually take out this attached lifecycle hook as a result of the other thing. We'll take out the console log because we don't need that either. And so now I can publish this up there, and we're going to Rickroll someone. We don't know who yet, but we are going to totally Rickroll someone. So we're going to close this, and now I should be able to close this issue because I made the Rickroll element on webcomponents.org. Now we're going to take the greatest modal, and much like the other one, right? We're going to put that off of here. Okay, and then, you know, we're going to greatest modal on, actually, I'm going to put greatest modal under me just because I don't want, you know, these are silly samples, but I don't want that to get associated incorrectly where someone thinks it's the greatest modal. So I'm going to do greatest modal. This is the greatest modal I've ever made as a web component. We're totally going to get people to click this. I mean, who doesn't want the greatest modal that ever existed? All right, so I'm going to go in. We're going to cheat a little bit on terminal here. vi.git/config. And we're going to change our remote here. Instead of pointing to there, we're going to point to BTO Pro. That's right. Okay. Git add A, git commit M. The greatest modal ever. Okay. Whoops. Quote. Git push origin master. We probably should also tag it for release. So vi.demo again because I still haven't updated that part yet. Learn web components. Okay, save. All right. Git add. Hey, git commit. Demo. Git push. Origin master. I mistyped quite a bit. I apologize. All right, and we're gonna do sh update demo. And this is effectively my process for everything. So. We've got a heck of a lot of elements. I could have sworn that I updated that, right? BTO Pro, git push, origin master, right? Well, that was weird. Oh, I know what's going on there. I know what's going on. Yeah, I didn't update the, I see. Yeah, just based on the way this little tooling is supposed to work, it's not supposed to point to. Not supposed to point there. So I can make this point to. There we go. Okay, now we'll do the sh update. Get that Rickroll up there. And then we can publish it up to webcomponents.org. We'll go over to webcomponents.org, publish element, scroll down, prove I'm not a robot. We're going to point to BTO Pro /greatest modal. All right, go back over here. Update. All right, it's going to publish. And the only other thing I need is a tagged release for this incredibly silly, the greatest element of all time. Element is huge. All right, so cool. Get status. Get commit. One more. Okay. Get push origin master. I like to make sure everything is kept in sync at all times. Get tag 1.0.0. Get push tags. Now that'll be up there. Excellent. And now I can hit publish. And go over to my greatest modal. We're going to refresh the page. We're going to hit edit. We're going to go to btopro.githubio. Right, there's a BYU calendar widget, but actually instead it's going to be greatest modal, copy, paste. Hey, there's a little demo site for greatest modal. Ah, gotcha! Yes, so now greatest modal ever is up there. We're going to point to the greatest modal. Someone I guarantee is going to click on greatest modal, and they are going to be so happy. I just can't even express to you how happy someone is going to be when they get the greatest modal. I'm not really sure why greatest modal's little auto demonstration isn't working. I'll have to look at that. But the little demo link will show up once this clears the cache of this, and then they will be super happy about the greatest modal that we've tricked them into being Rickrolled. So that is kind of a step through our process very quickly. You see I now contributed 2 elements to webcomponents.org. Clearly someone is going to be mad at me that I have done this in the future. And still that one is not showing up. That's so weird that the Rickroll demo is not there, but the other one is. Oh well. But now you get the idea of what our process is, and I hope this was at least somewhat helpful to see how we run through and crank these things out very rapidly.